Welcome back. I hope that you've had a great weekend and a great holiday, whether you're celebrating Passover or Easter, or if you weren't celebrating either. Uh, Understandably, people would be upset because of this horrible attack that happened in Sri Lanka, committed apparently by a local Islamist terrorist group. And it's very frustrating watching these reactions come in, and yet people want to start to kind of philosophize and channel the frustration in a certain way. So obviously, I would say that if you can't address the fact that this was a result of Islamist terror, then that you don't deserve to be an honest commentator. Okay, if you don't want to address who the actual culprits are, then you don't deserve to be an honest commentator. And yes, there's plenty of very accurate comparisons being made to last month's Christchurch shooting, which was also a horrific event. But the difference is that at the time, the government of New Zealand was especially uh, diligent at trying to make the response really, directed towards helping the quote unquote Muslim community. The Muslim community was the one that was accurately portrayed as the targets of the shooting, and the person who committed the shooting was described as basically a far right ethno nationalist, even though I think there were certainly elements of his beliefs that were consistent with that, and then there were other elements that showed that he was a provocateur, that he wanted to create basically the chaos that would lead to an all-out race war, and obviously the government crackdown that did follow was something that he found desirable. He wanted the confiscation of guns to be a result of his act in murdering those people at those mosques in New Zealand. Now back to today, because why focus on that shooting when we have this is a bombing, and apparently there were multiple culprits. So a friend of mine sent me a message, and he pointed out, well, why is it that the Sri Lankan authorities are not offering to wear crosses in response to this shooting? And I think personally that they shouldn't wear crosses. But the issue is not that. The issue is that he's pointing out that in the wake of the Christchurch shooting, there were a number of New Zealand politicians and people, police officers, in fact, that I saw that started wearing the hijab, the Muslim customary head scarf. And in my opinion, that was that was the peak of just pandering. It was the peak of trying to use tragedy in order to promote a consensus. And I don't think consensus is really what's needed. I think what's needed is truth and forthrightness. If you're trying to address a crisis, address an issue that's being thrust on your country, the answer has nothing to do with trying to create, this sense of empathy and co-identity that these people are doing, these politicians or whatever, because that's been done for the past few years anyway. How many times, and just as he was saying, why is it that you don't see these politicians in Sri Lanka, which is a majority, I think it's a majority Buddhist country, and the largest minority would be the Hindus. So there's the Sinhalese in the south and the Tamils in the north. The Tamils being the Hindus. But when you talk about murdering people on the basis of religious faith, I don't think that it should matter whether they are of one religion or another. If you do believe in peace, it used to be people who were on the left or people who considered themselves progressives. They believed in a humanistic doctrine that basic, people have a basic expectation of dignity and protection to their existence, and that became the basis of the anti-war movement. That became the basis of opposing the war in Vietnam for a lot of these people. So they were going to respond to our military and government's statement that the Cold War justified a prolonged engagement in Vietnam. Nowadays, that's not what progressives, that's not what people who are, on the quote unquote left, that's not what people who consider themselves, forward thinking, that's not what they believe. They look at you in terms of whether you are part of the upper class or the lower class, whether you're the oppressor or the oppressed. And that's pretty much what's become the norm today. And if you are a member of a group like, I guess, Sri Lankan Christians, then of course you're entitled to some degree of empathy. But it's not the degree of empathy that a Muslim is, because in their mind, Muslim countries are the countries that are oppressed, and Muslim people are the ones that are oppressed. And the people who are oppressing them are the West. They are the colonialists. They are the people who have pretty much engendered this response. So the real question is, why would Sri Lanka, last week there was the Notre Dame fire, and there were people who were, they used this occasion to, for whatever reason, to dredge up issues of the fact that the Notre Dame has a history of being part of the Catholic overlordship of France and its oppression of the Protestant minority, and also France was a colonial power, and the Catholic Church itself. Okay, good. Well, that's all well and good. Now that this is happening, okay, suppose that you were right last week, which I think was a completely ridiculous time to bring up, the history of Notre Dame as an evil thing, because you didn't have a problem with that when you visited Paris. You didn't have a problem with that when you talked about, how France is such a progressive country. Nobody cared about that. But suddenly the Notre Dame starts to burn, and people start to look at it as some sort of colonial vestige, even though it is part and parcel of the French country. Okay, you don't have to. I personally have no real connection to France, and to be honest with you, I've made fun of it plenty of times. I much prefer Italy. So, so in any case, getting on with it. So now that so France, you wanted to deride as this country where, everything about its culture is basically oppressive, and the colonialism and everything, which are issues that everybody is willing to discuss, but you find it necessary to discuss it when its main national symbol is burning. Okay, that's what's really ironic. Now, what's going to be the excuse of people? Sri Lanka has never been a country that's colonized any other country. The people there are not people who are oppressing anyone else. The Christian minority there are kind of vestiges. Yeah, they're vestiges of a colonial past. But what are you supposed to do? Tell them to, by force, convert to other religions, like I guess Buddhism or something? So this would be the ultimate, what do you call it? The ultimate patronizing, that you see fit to tell other people that one religion that you don't believe in, Islam, is the oppressed compared to another religion that you also don't believe in, which is Christianity, even though in Sri Lanka it has nothing to do with oppression. It has to do with religious zealotry, religious fundamentalism, jihadist terrorism. That's what it has to do with. And then you have people like this guy, Saif Khalid, who is saying Indian media's blatant Islamophobia at display, hashtag Sri Lanka, hashtag Easter Sunday. And he's saying exclusive, so this is from Indian TV. It says, exclusive face of Sri Lanka terror attack revealed on CNN News 18. Zaharan Hashim, suicide bomber behind the attack on Shangri-La Hotel. According to top intel sources, Hashim wanted to attack Indian High Commission. Well, that's where the tweet gets cut off. But the fact of the matter is that they didn't say that he was Muslim. They just put his name there. And by the name, you would probably infer that he's a Muslim person. And look, I mean, I don't think that we should just observe the Muslims as just these horrible people. I just, in fact, prior to making this video, I received like very, very nice, good wishes for the holidays from a Muslim friend of mine who I used to work with. We haven't even seen each other in three years. So I think that if you believe in a common humanity, if you believe in the right of everyone to worship in peace, if you do believe in that, and I'm not saying you do, then you wouldn't call this an Islamophobic statement. You would say that it's accurate, that there's groups that are obviously fanatically committed to Islam, and this journalist might think, oh, well, they're coming after me because they're using this person's name. Well, I would say, and I admit I'm probably making an assumption, but it's possible that the person who committed the attack might have a much more strong and committed perspective on the religion than the person complaining about Islamophobia. There's a lot of people in the Western world who come from Muslim families who grew up in the Muslim faith that I think are not, they don't want to be associated with these acts of carnage. But what are you supposed to do when there are also organizations that are very much at play, that are they're going out and committing these acts? They're trying to recruit more and more people in the Muslim world to be committed to that. They're openly trying to take over countries. They have taken over countries and transformed them into that vision of Islam. And what are we supposed to do then? We're supposed to call that, we're supposed to make up a name for that, make up a different religion for that. I think that the message of this weekend, unfortunately, because it wasn't a good weekend when you have hundreds of people murdered by virtue of the fact that they are Christian and they wanted to go to worship, regardless of what, I don't believe in Christianity. A lot of people around the world don't believe in Christianity. We also don't believe that you should be targeted by virtue of your faith. But I think this show of response, that there's hundreds of people. In fact, I saw there was a billionaire from Denmark who lost 3 of his children in the attack, amongst all the other worshipers. Why is it that religion is really important? The belief in some sort of metaphysical power, the belief in traditions that are connected to that, the belief in some sort of common heritage based around that faith. Why is it so important? Well, I would say that you have people, in the case of, in my case, it's Judaism, who, lacking any other common root, they have to find something that is tying them together. There's people, in Judaism, it's people from Russia being able to connect with people from Yemen, being able to connect with people from Morocco, being able to connect with people from England or from Germany. Through what? Through faith, through tradition, through beliefs that are common. And yes, there are differences, but the common belief, the common root, is what really ties people together. So it's the same thing when you talk about people who come from obviously a country in Europe, Denmark, go to Sri Lanka. They want to see a cathedral. They want to visit people and see how their faith is practiced in another country in the world. And what do they get for that? They get basically, they get their life deprived of them for the simple crime of wanting to find other people that may have common beliefs to them. And that's really the problem. You have, for years I've heard this myth about the white supremacist white Christian terrorist, and yes, there are several of them that have been, they have been a blight on our country. But for example, Timothy McVeigh is portrayed as a white Christian, but in fact, you can find sources. This is the Weekly Standard. I'm not a big fan of the Weekly Standard. Is gone anyway, but I'm not a fan of the Weekly Standard. But in any case, Timothy McVeigh actually said that his science that science is my religion. He didn't believe in heaven when he was being executed, or hell. He didn't look at it that way. So I think that people who, like, first of all, you have to actually judge people based on their beliefs and not just on their heritage. Okay, there's probably, look, there were a lot of people who were you know, terrorists, let's just use a word for it, in the 70s and 80s that came from Muslim countries, but they didn't believe in Islam anymore. They believed in usually it was Marxism, Leninism, or Pan-Arabism or something. That can't be blamed on Islam. Some of them probably were practicing Muslims, but that still the motive behind the attack had nothing to do with Islam. That kind of started to come along since the 80s. So you still have people who continue to believe that Timothy McVeigh was a Christian terrorist. He wasn't. Yes, he probably grew up in a home where Christianity was the default religion. But a lot of people, as you probably know, grow up in the U.S. and they don't really have any connection to Christianity, even though their family might be Christian. You know, a lot of these metal groups that are anything but Christian, the members. I think Slayer, for example, their lead guitarist might have mentioned that his inspiration came from Catholic school. And if you know Slayer, they're not exactly a very Catholic-friendly group. So I might be wrong. If somebody knows the band that I'm talking about, you can put in the comments. But yeah, people will continue to claim that Timothy McVeigh was a Christian terrorist, and it just is not true. So it's not about empathy. It's not about trying to make people feel better. It's not about avoiding panic. It's about really arriving at the root of what's going on and at the truth, and having people assess the problem instead of burying it under a bunch of platitudes and well wishes. So yeah, the response is a little late, but yesterday was a holiday for me, and I was also at my dad's, so I wasn't really gonna record a video there. But otherwise, this week I am going to have a few other videos. Stay tuned. I think at 6:30 today there will be a live chat with a person who's active in the Blatant movement. So stay tuned. I'm hoping it's going to be today. I will put out an alert. And also, please like, share, subscribe. Subscribe to me on BitChute and on Minds.com. Both of those are at Chef Leopard. And also on Gab at Starscream85, and I'll talk to you guys later.